Welcome to the Red Pill. I'm Steve Crawford. I am here with somebody that I've been watching on TV for a long friggin' time. There was a show that came out in, early 2000s, I'm thinking, called Ghost Hunters that kind of set the world afire. And Barry FITZGERALD was somebody they picked up when they decided to do an investigation in Europe, well, in Britain and the UK, right? Everybody just loved the show so much, and Barry was the guy who was their guide. So Irish-born Barry FITZGERALD has over 30 years experience with the world of supernatural, in which he is known, and has taken him to new levels of intrigue and mystery, appearing on all 56 episodes of Ghost Hunters International. That's pretty cool. He had headed a team on the American NBC's own sci-fi network. That is cool. That's right. I'll edit this back together later. Mm-hmm. What was the name? It was Rob, right?
Rob Demarest.
Rob Demarest. How did he get in there before you? I thought for sure you would have been the original lead investigator since they already knew you first.
Well, they had already been, from what I'm led to believe, they had already been looking for people to fill certain positions, and they got people to send in their videos, and all that stuff to see if they were suitable. But I didn't have to go through that. I just got a phone call from LA to say, we're doing a show. This is what it's about. Mm-hmm. Would you like to be part of it? And that was it. That was me out the door.
That's fantastic. Okay, back to the bio. His natural progression led to the writing and publishing of books on subjects within his field of research, such as The Complete Approach, The Influence, My Home is Haunted, Now What? I love that title. In the Midst of Gods, Banshee, Searching the Sidhe. How do you say that?
She.
Oh, okay. See, I hate those words. They mess me up. A series of investigative stories into Irish mythology and folklore called Legend Seekers, and a fictional trilogy, The Council of Three. His most challenging cases drove him to explore the Mayan underworld in Belize. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. Known as, what's the word? Starts with
Xibalba.
an X. There we go. Leading the team into the furthest steps of the Mayan version of hell and hiking the Drakensberg Mountains in KwaZulu Nation in South Africa to investigate a cave associated with ancestral worship for the Zulu Nation. That is trippy. Recently, however, his most challenging research comes in the form of Irish mythology. It's exceptionally confrontational and direct deities of old. That is very cool. And his website is www.charmstealer.com. Get that out of the way now, and we'll probably bring it up a few times over the interview. And this is not an interview. It's more of a talk. Barry was one of my first interviews. I believe it was like 8 years ago now, Barry.
It was a long time now.
It's just wild. And we actually started talking. The conversation was just starting to get good. And somebody, I don't know, maybe it was just Skype, but maybe it was the powers that be, started messing with the signal right as we were starting to talk about Zionism and stuff. So we won't touch on that at the moment, but what I would like to get into is you're working on a new book?
Yes. Well, I've just finished my last book there, which is out next month, the 1st of March, and it's called The Deceptions of Gods and Men. Mm-hmm. And that particular book, it brings the reader to examine this path that we started to uncover, that linked a majority of the fringe research fields that included ufology, cryptozoology, the paranormal, and started uncovering this thread that was weaving through them all. And we started following this thread, and we began to see that there were a series of entities that were manipulating these different fields of investigation and appearing with different masks. Mm-hmm. But the way that we started to track them was that we stopped following the mask, because when we were doing that, we were finding that we were driving into a brick wall. when we go back far enough, they just seem to disappear. And when we're looking at this idea of back far enough, sometimes it could go back 25 years, sometimes 100 years, but eventually we lost them, and it was relatively new that we lost them in the relatively new period. So instead, what we started to do, because we were seeing this common factor that was filtering through all the research fields, we started following them with this. The way that they interacted with us, the way the phenomena interacted with us, is the way that we started to track them, because that was the thing that didn't change. So even though we look at the way the grey aliens will come through and attack people as they're sleeping and things like that, and they'll have interaction there, this phenomena was slipping back into the Irish mythology, for instance, and this aspect of fairy entrapment. We also seen that reference crossing over into the Middle Eastern jinn, the old gods, and all of this was all tying everything together, and the way that they interacted with us remained the same. So that's whenever we started to make breakthroughs, and I've been able to with the book, we've been able to push it way back and expose. At least we put a strong hypothesis through as to what we think we're actually dealing with.
Right. That's and this is what is going to be in the book. So you're kind of teasing me. I'm not going to get that
Yes.
answer.
The next book that I'm working on is called the Fruit of the Gods. That one has just completely taken me on a whirlwind tour.
What's that title again?
The Fruit of the Gods.
The Fruit of the Gods. Okay.
And it looks at this aspect of the worship that was being done in the crescent, the Fertile Crescent, and how the people who were part of that were coming across to Western Europe and building their temples here. But there was also this connection with the tree that came with it, and also this fruit that fell from the tree fell at the summer solstice, and that tied in with how you made the connection with the old ones, and the information was passed back and forth. So that has been a wonderful experience. I have to say, intriguing to the last.
Right. There is something that has been itching my brain, and actually one of the other hosts at our network, Revolution Radio. For people listening, make sure you just come down to www.revolution.radio, join the Chatsy chat room. There is a navigation bar there that you can click. You can buy merchandise. You can click donation. We need donations to keep the station running because we don't put commercials on. Because when you put ads on, they try to tell you what you can and can't put on your network. And Mr. Rowe is one of the guys at this station, and he had started talking about Tartaria. Does that word mean anything to you?
Tartaria. I can't say that I've come across it on my travels.
That's something you may want to check out on YouTube. It's pretty flippin' trippy. I could talk for hours on the subject, but it has to do with the last time you and I were talking, we got into giants. And apparently these Tartarians were giants. They ranged from 10 to like 20 feet tall. And they had free energy. And a lot of the buildings, the buildings that we think are parliaments and stuff like that, if you actually dug down, that there was a major mud flood. Have you heard about that theory?
Oh, yes.
It's all tied together. And
Right.
the Tartarians were wiped out somehow. The mud flood came in, and some of these buildings, if you were to dig down, there's more windows and doors that appear to be buried beneath the ground. But we've been told that these are our cathedrals that we built and our parliaments that we built. It's just really trippy stuff. And there's another author, Paul Wallace. Are you aware of him?
I'm not, no.
There's a book you may want to check out in your spare time that touches a lot on the freaky stuff I like to get into. It's called Escaping from Eden.
Okay.
And Paul Wallace used to be a priest. Actually, he may still be. But he even gets into touches on the possibilities of a domed Earth, and so it's like really freaky stuff. I'm sure a lot of the flat earthers out there are going to want to reach out. So any flat earthers listening, get yourself Escaping from Eden by Paul Wallace, and then shortly after that, go to charmstealers.com and get some of Barry's books, because these are things that will itch your brain and you'll want more answers. Um, what is, geez, I'm not even sure where to go from what is the time frame you're thinking for your new book to be out? How long do we have to wait?
Well, I'm still waiting on laboratory tests coming back, because they had now samples. I delivered samples of the fruit to them this year, or sorry, last year. So I'm waiting on those samples coming back. A lot of the historical work has been done in tracing the symbolism of this particular fruit back, and the aspect of the sharing of information, and how the tree is connected with. And it's a strange thing, that as the book was developing, it was the last thing in my head, but as this has been developing, it looks like we're possibly looking at the biblical tree of knowledge. And the fruit is not an apple by any means, but it is something quite unique to behold, and especially when the fruit falls. I'll give you an example. Last year, when the fruit fell from the tree in the summer solstice, we have passage chambers here in Ireland that are orientated to the setting sun on the solstice, as well as the sunrise. A lot of this was heavily related to sun worship, and serpentine worship, and all of this stuff, sacrificial and all that. But this fruit, whenever it falls, I picked two of the samples up and put them into a plastic bag, sealed it, and there were two people I needed to drop the fruit off to. One was a herbalist. The reason that I dropped it off to a herbalist is because the people who built these passage chambers were deeply spiritual. So I needed to address the holistic perspective of this fruit, as well as the chemical perspective, which is why the second lot was dropped off to the laboratory. But that particular evening, I arrived at the herbalist, and the fruit had been sitting on the dash of the car in the plastic bag, still sealed.
Oh no!
And I was speaking to him out of the car window as he came out of his house, and I lifted the bag. And it was at that moment, when I lifted the bag, the hair on my left arm rose, and I thought, wow! And it was a very distinct energy seemed to be being produced by this particular fruit. And I never said anything. I just handed the bag over to him, and he had both his hands out, and I set the bag into it. And then he looked at me and he says, "What the hell are these?" And this particular sensation lasted for around 4 days, and then it began to subside.
Really?
Yes.
That's trippy. So it
small
wasn't you
batteries.
dropped the bag down and then it went away. It just stayed with you.
No, it stayed for around 4 days and then finally dissipated and dropped off. But it was strange. I spoke to the guys in the laboratory about that particular experience, and they said it's possibly the fruit itself is producing serotonin, which is possibly tingling the skin. And I said, I can understand where you're coming from, but they remained in a plastic bag. There was no contact with my skin and the fruit. This is an energetical signature that I was picking up on. So they're stumped about that. So we've got two camps going on at the moment, and I'm really excited to see where this is going to go to.
That is tripping. Now, the feeling, was it just like over the skin, or was it through you? Did it permeate?
Over the skin.
Over the skin. That's one.
Very much so, over the skin, and seeing these passage chambers and everything else, and understanding that there were doorways to these other places, and where knowledge was shared in the ancient ways. it is quite something to see that when these chambers were activated on the solstice, we also have the fruit to help, and even the Akkadian artwork in Babylonia
Mhm.
even depicts this fruit being handed over by the gods to the
I'm
kings and the
rethinking
priests.
of the picture you're talking about. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. Wow.
and so it's been a one hell of an experience, and people will people in Ireland, of course, are they're going to find this difficult because from our historical perspective, we've been educated in our schools to see these people in one way, these Neolithic people in one way.
Hmm.
Um, but a recent archaeological dig in County Antrim in the north of the island unveiled a grave of from the Neolithic period, and when they done the DNA research, they're from the Middle East. They're from the places that this fruit grew.
Wow.
So we're it's really piecing everything together.
Hmm.
And there are times I find that when I'm writing a book, sometimes I have to wait on information.
Hmm.
It's wherever it's coming from, I need to wait. And sometimes I could wait 6 months, 7 months, and then
Right.
suddenly, boom, there it is. So I have
Mhm.
to go to work again on that. So at the minute, I have enough to do at the moment, and then I shall wait on the next, as they say, the download.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty much like it's a good thing to almost have two books on the go so that if you get held up on one, you can jump over to the other while you're waiting for the info on the one.
it can be. It can also be a nuisance as well because one of the other books that I'm working on, which is a prequel to the Council of Three, um, it's a totally different fish altogether, and
Can
switching your
take,
brain back and
yeah.
forward can take time, and I admire these people that can just at the flick of a switch flip from one to the other, but unfortunately I can't.
I admire people who can remember what they had for breakfast. Like, the last head injury I had, I was I have back issues and
Yes.
there's a little bit of signal loss. So every once in a while when I'm walking, my one leg will just give out on me.
Wow.
That happened to me as I was walking up a flight of stairs.
Oh no.
Boom, smashed right
Oh
in the
no.
third eye area.
Oh no
And
no no.
oh yeah, I was in a cloud for the last 2 years and
Yeah.
just starting to come out of it. Now,
Oh.
people will look at me. I am a chronic pot smoker. I was back then too, but it's because of the back issues. I
Hmm.
do not want to be a junkie on pharmaceuticals. I would rather just take the edge off by smoking pot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so trippy that one head injury could just, your memory's gone. So, like people listening, just be freaking careful and use railings when you're walking upstairs. Because if you're like me, you could end up losing your memory. It's insane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It can be easily done these days as well, you know. But well, that's unfortunate now. But hopefully it'll start to settle down, and you start making those connections again.
It has. There's a little, like people keep talking about the third eye, and when they depict it, they show it being in the center of your forehead.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's not where it is.
Hmm.
Mine, well, or at least mine, is right in between your eyebrows, slightly down the bridge of your nose, because that spot there randomly, actually, it's not random. When something's going on with one of my daughters,
Yeah.
it turns beet red, like just a certain, it looks like a cigarette burn. It
Mm.
looks painful. It's
Yeah.
not. I could touch it. And then it fades when they're happy again. It's freaking me out. But that's starting to come back.
It's funny that you should say that because when I've been doing my research, and this is something my wife has noticed as well, that if I'm getting into something which where I shouldn't be,
Mhm.
I find that I can get cut off, and that particular area that you're talking about ends
Uh-huh.
up with like a Harry Potter line through the
Yeah.
middle of it,
Yeah.
and that cuts me off, and I
Uh-huh.
don't know where it comes from. It just okay, you're done. You've gone too
Yeah.
far. And I have to wait for that to go away before I can get back in and start doing what I'm doing.
Exactly. It's like it's cutting you off. It's like, okay, you've got a decent amount of info, process it,
Yeah,
and then we'll let you back in to learn some more.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Like I get that line. and the beet red thing at the same
Uh-huh.
time. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty
Mhm.
trippy. Uh, what is there anything else that you'd like to just let's go off the cuff now. What are things you would like to talk about that you don't usually get to when you're on shows?
Oh my goodness. I think that there's a huge amount of things, especially with doing the research now into the mythology and the folklore. Of course, that has thrown me back into the ancient manuscripts and even the cuneiform texts of Sumeria and Babylon and things like that. So, and it's interesting from that particular perspective that, like I said before, with the deceptions of gods and men, we started tracing this phenomena by the way it interacts with us.
Hmm.
And there, in fact, I'm just releasing the third edition shortly of Banshee, which from an Irish perspective is this omen of death
Hmm.
that is visited upon people who live on the island. And I've heard the Banshee quite a few times now, and with it, you always get that notice of death.
Is it
Um,
only in one certain area you hear the
nope,
banshee, or is it reported across Ireland?
all over. The
Wow.
book itself, we ended up interviewing many people across the island of Ireland, right into our cities, and she's been even seen and heard in the cities.
Hmm.
And a lot of people said that, oh well, the electric light killed the fairies. That's not the case. The folklore of this island is still very much alive. It is us that have become detached to it. Our technology has served to make us deaf of what's going on around us.
Hmm.
And even aspects of the Banshee. Just this week, I was finding common factors, similarities within the cuneiform text, describing a creature that was the same, performed the same way that the Babylonians did.
Right.
And I'm thinking, how can this even be? This is not just something from the Middle Ages. This is something that's going back thousands and thousands of years.
Hmm.
So that I'm always amazed by that. But I'm also amazed as well because we have this ability, and I don't really understand why we do it, but we have this ability that when we're devising something, or we recognize some new, possibly new um, phenomena, we give it a new name without checking to see did it exist before, did our ancestors experience that?
Right. Maybe it's
And
already
and I
changed.
find by giving it the new name, we end up in a situation where we're not checking
Right.
what possibly we could interact with.
Uh-huh.
We're blindly going into this that, oh well, this has just been discovered and this is blah 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 blah. And I'll give you an example. There was a couple of UFO guys I was speaking to, and we were talking about some of the folks that would sit in circle, and try and draw this UFO phenomena toward them. Now, call it what you want. You can call it, you're drawing it in, or you're appealing to it, or whatever you want to call it. You're sitting in circle. You're conjuring it. It's
Hmm.
an esoteric path that you've just entered into, and it doesn't matter what you call it. You have to recognize it for what it is.
Yeah.
But to give it a new name, I feel gives it carte blanche to go and do whatever it wants to, and we're blind into the side effects of that. And
And we're not able to track it because
no,
if they give it a new name, then we're forgetting about the thing we already know about that we
exactly,
can tie
yes, and
new
that's the
information.
big problem. That this idea of concentrating your focus on the universe, and asking for it. It's really what 10 years ago we had a book that was out in the bookstores called The Secret,
Hmm.
which was the exact same thing 10 years ago.
Hmm.
However, 2,000 years ago, we had the Druids on this island that called it Grinhold. It was the same process.
Yeah.
but we just keep changing the blasted name. And that, I feel, can be dangerous because we don't recognize what can happen
Hmm.
from doing that. And so those are the things that I feel that we need to address, and look into a little bit more, and address it as such. Um, because I feel that there is quite a lot of things out there that we should be paying attention to. The likes of the Deception of Gods and Men that's out in March, it really addresses this factor, and looks at, and follows the path of what our ancestors have left us behind. And I know that there's a lot of folks there may listen to this and say, well, if I didn't say it, it doesn't happen, and it's all BS. That's okay, but recognize that your life is short. You're basing your opinion and your basis and basing your perception of this universe on such a short time span.
Hmm.
What we have is access to thousands of years of record from our ancestors who have also had access to that and have influenced with that, or had meetings with that. So can we positively, in this short existence, say it doesn't happen? I feel that does it a great injustice.
Absolutely.
And I feel that the people who have gone before us have left us the clues, and we shouldn't be so flippant to throw things away.
A
The
lot of
way
the
we
clues are
do.
being destroyed, though. Like actually, the last time we talked, we were talking about how ISIS was going around destroying it. It's almost like they created ISIS to go around and destroy all the things they were discovering in Iraq from what was it, Gilgamesh? The
Yeah,
Gilgamesh's
there was
tombs?
Syria. Syria was another one as well. There was a terrible atrocities that were going on there. A lot of the stuff, of course, was going across into the black market.
Hmm.
And private collectors were spending millions on
Right.
getting these artifacts, and then they were disappearing. They're disappearing in private collections, and you'll never know anything about them again. Uh,
Exactly.
and that's a sorry thing to happen. Um, but again, with the book, we were able to see this aspect of this ancient worship, and things weren't all rosy as what we were led to believe. All the old times. We
Hmm.
were looking at it through rose-tinted glasses.
Oh,
Oh, there was an edge to that as well. So there are things there that we need to be aware of,
right.
and dangers involved with it. But that's life, and that's the deception of gods and men, which explains a lot of what we're actually dealing with, and how safely we can interact with it, and the dangers of interacting with it.
Hmm. Paul Wallace actually, he was getting into um, talking about just even the Bible, aliens in the Bible. And
Mm,
if you just use the plural version of Elohim and replace the singular with the plural throughout the whole Bible, the entire
mm,
Bible makes perfect sense.
mm, mhm,
And
mhm,
he gets into all of the scriptures and he changes certain words for other meanings that they are, because a lot of these words had several meanings as well,
mhm,
right? So he
mhm,
goes, if you just do this and this, all of a sudden, this passage is telling us about the giants and how, eh, even like, say, um, in Greece, the Greek gods, it talks about gods, plural, the Bible, gods, plural. You and I got into that before. And so it makes a lot more sense and it's a lot more believable. It makes me believe even Greek mythology there, and these gods were battling each other. These were the battles they would be seeing in the sky. And the giants, if these gods were having uh, intercourse with human women and they became these giants, who's to say that's not who the Tartarians were? Even it's just the speculation. You can just run rampant with
mm,
it, and
mhm,
that's why I
mhm.
love the subject matter so much. I would love if you could get into fairies for a minute. There are a lot of people who don't understand what a fairy is supposed to be. We think Tinkerbell from Disney. Can you give us a little insight into the Irish fairies?
Sure, yeah. The Irish fairies themselves, they have a long lineage, with the island and off the island. They have common factors which are shared also in the Middle East and across up into the Nordic countries. And we also find similar traces of them down in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. So it's a global affair. But for the Irish, you're right, we don't see them as Tinkerbell. You know, they're when they do appear, they're very much like us. And when they choose to appear, they're very much like us.
Like
But
size and everything, you mean?
they will be exceptional. You know, there won't be a hair out of place. They are perfect in every way. But that's the way they want you to perceive them.
Right.
So this is where I have to reiterate and make you understand. This is how they want me to see them. So there is an element of deception that we have to understand, and that is commonplace when dealing with this particular type of entity. But one particular encounter that I had with them was on a mountainside on the west coast of Ireland, and this place is known for their appearances. So I went up, and it was coming on to dusk, and I had made my bed in an old passage chamber that was around 2000 BC. It was the only shelter that there was on the mountainside. So that was me. I was in a bivy bag and lay out on the stones. Now I was taking notes in my notepad of the weather and everything else when I turned my head to look at the second passage chamber that was around 100 feet away. And there were three people walking around the edge of it. And they were in fleece tops, red, I think it was red, green, and yellow. I think those were the three colors for some time now. But I would have put them in their late teens, and they walked with large canes, large sticks, walking sticks. Now they looked like any other teenager, of course. But I thought, well, if they're local, I'll just finish up my notes here and go down and ask them if they've ever seen anything unusual around this particular place, saying it's been known for fairy activity. I finished the last 2 or 3 words in the notebook, put it away, and got up to go and talk to them, and they were gone. And I thought, now, there's no way they could get off this mountainside because they were in those primary colours, and I'm going to see them a mile off. And I could see 6 miles in any direction.
Right.
So, yeah, they're here somewhere. And I thought maybe the passage chamber, maybe it is still intact, and maybe they've gone inside. So I walked down to the passage chamber, and they're gone. There is no trace of these people whatsoever. So I end up going back to my original base, and I'm standing on top of it, trying to get a camera to switch off the flash, because I didn't want the locals seeing this flash of light appearing on top of the mountain, creating another rumor. So I was working away with that, and I happened to look up, and 2 people were walking away from me. And I thought this was unusual, because they would have to have walked past me, and my peripheral vision is superb. No one passed me. So I looked at these 2 people who were walking away, and I thought, something's odd here, because they just walked through a flock of sheep and the sheep didn't move. If I walk near the sheep, within 30 feet, they will dart in every direction.
Yeah.
And so I looked at them through the binoculars, and that's whenever I realized, have I broken these binoculars? Because I'm only seeing one. And I put the camera, or the binoculars, back down again and looked, and there was 2. I lifted the camera, and the camera only seen 1. So it seemed that through this medium of glass, I was seeing what was really there. But it was being directed to me that there were 2.
That's trippy.
I took the photograph. I have the photograph of the one walking away, but the second one, who was shorter, and I began to think to myself, is this double vision, or what on earth's going on? But the second one was slightly shorter and wore a different color of jacket. So that wasn't the case. It wasn't double vision. Something was going on there, and it had a conscious connection. And this is the trouble that we tend to have with this type of phenomena. When they link to you consciously, that's it. They got you.
Yeah.
That hook is in there. and your fight or flight can be subdued, so you no longer hear it.
Right.
That can be a serious problem when dealing with this particular type of phenomena.
Right.
But I got the evidence anyhow, and they continued walking, and they were walking toward a cliff edge, so they never came back. So I assume either they fell to their death, or they just vanished back into the rock from whence
Right.
they came. So that is the fairy. Now, we have had long dealings with them, and whenever I say dealings, I mean these dealings are wide ranging. We have this aspect of men, women, and children being taken. This abduction phenomena, same phenomena, different mask.
Right.
We also have this aspect of mutilation, cattle mutilation, animal mutilation that occurs with the fairy. Again, we see that within the modern age of ufology.
Absolutely.
And when we go back far enough, and we look, for instance, in the Middle Ages, there are carvings in France that depict small creatures that are inflicting pain on people, using spears that go through their abdomen. Now, they were called devils at that particular time, but it's the same phenomena, different mask. So the fairies are part of that. The fairies are very, very similar to the jinn. The jinn, of course, as well, a deterrent to all of this phenomenon is iron. They
Iron.
despise iron, and I have had first-hand encounters with the Greys and their fear of iron. I witnessed
No,
this for
let's wait a
myself.
second. Now, you just said you've had firsthand
Yes,
experience with the Greys. Now,
yes.
can we get into that for a second without forgetting what you were just going to say?
Okay. It was I was heavily involved with researching this particular aspect of the ufological field, and with the beings that were appearing. And what I tend to do, in listening again to our ancestors, iron was always the deterrent when dealing with the likes of the fairy and things like that. Now, I'm going out into territory. I'm on my own on top of mountains and everything else, where, okay, it'll probably serve me to walk with a hazel cane if I trip over, and also wear an iron amulet.
Right.
That was the one thing that they couldn't tolerate. So this particular evening came around, and it was just shortly after I had a meeting with a scientist here in Ireland, who was also having experiences with ETs. We'll call them ETs. And he had left, and so I was there, and I knew this impulse to take off the iron, just leave it in another room, take off the iron, and I did. And that night, I have to say, and I had no memory of what was going on, but I had terrible, terrible restless, exhausting sleep, and I just couldn't understand why. And the second night, I put the iron back on again, and that's whenever I came to in the middle of the night, and there was 4 of them at the foot of the bed. Now, the reason that they were afraid is because, number one, I was awake, and number two, I could move.
Right.
The iron stopped them from shutting down the movement from the 4th vertebra.
Yeah, your motor cortex and stuff.
Yep, it was all active. And what happens to a human when he gets afraid? He gets dangerous.
Yeah.
And they were afraid. And this is something as well that we see within the historical aspects of people who were dealing with the fairy. Iron was always used to keep them away from the children. Iron was used over a barn to keep the animals safe at night.
Yes. Yes.
So it was always the iron. To ward off the evil eye, you wore an iron pin.
Hmm.
Um, and you have these houses that were circled in iron fences. There were primarily spiritual moats, if you like.
Right.
Um, and so the iron was always a key component, and there was something special about the iron which I'm tracing back in history presently to find out what was going on with the iron and when did they first discover this. Now, for some reason, and I don't know why, but this aspect of Tutankhamun's dagger was made out of meteoritic iron.
Right.
Um, Now that in itself is a very powerful weapon when dealing with it, when wielding it spiritually. It is a
Hmm.
very, very powerful weapon. Never mind the fact that yes, you can slice someone's throat with it,
Right.
but spiritually, there's a deeper intent with this. So I'm pushing back in that as well. And I was told a story recently of a guy in the Middle East who was having terrible, terrible trouble with his jinn. It was coming and killing his animals. And this particular night, he heard the animals being killed, and he went out and he had an iron chain, and he threw it at the creature,
Hmm.
because it had to materialize to affect physically. It has to
Right.
materialize, and he threw the chain at this thing. It was an old iron chain. The moment it hit it, he said there was a massive explosion came off it, and it was
Yeah.
gone. That thing never came back.
I guess
The
not.
animals have been saved from now on, so
Wow.
they're absolutely safe. So iron was always that thing, and the same with the fairies. Iron, they are deeply deeply afraid of iron. There have been some suggestions that back in the day, there was a war between us and them, and that's when we started using iron within our weapons,
Hmm.
and that's what brought them down. Now the likes of a lot of these creatures that will appear in, for instance, the likes of Skinwalker Ranch in Utah and things like that.
I
Um,
just wrote that down. Skinwalker Ranch. I am psychic. I'm telling you.
um, and I suspect that if they're using iron instead of lead, they're going to
Uh-huh.
make a great impact.
Yeah.
And I was out in Utah, and visiting the ranch, in October 2019, just before the pandemic struck. And so I had experiences there as well, but I was trying to understand what was going on at Skinwalker. So I think I've possibly got to the bottom of it. But the iron is a huge thing with the fairy. Now, the fairy will appear in whatever way they wish. It's how they interact with you. And there are specific ways when dealing with this phenomena as a whole. If you wish to use cameras or if you wish to use recording equipment, there are certain things that you need to do first off to make sure that that does not get out. That you're secretly hiding cameras, you're secretly hiding audio equipment. Um, so that's a big thing to understand, and to try and work around to get a greater success of capturing the phenomena. Because there's one sure thing, they do not like cameras because the camera displays what's really there. I was speaking to Jacques Vallée, and he's an exceptional researcher within ufology, and he was telling me a story of this French lady, businesswoman, who was leaving Paris on the motorway with her son, who was in the back seat. Now she was driving one of those Renault Espace. It's a huge seven-seater vehicle with a full sunglass roof. And as they left Paris on the motorway, this huge, massive UFO, bigger than a football stadium, just dropped out of the clouds. And she was driving underneath this. Her mouth was open in awe, looking at this through the glass window, as you can imagine. Her
Uh-huh.
son, of course, was seeing this as well. And she threw the camera, because she was driving, she threw the camera phone back to her son and asked him to film this. And he did. But even though they were seeing this huge, big, massive craft, the camera just recorded this star-like phenomena that was hanging below the clouds. Not this massive thing. I said, once they've got you hooked with the conscious link, that's it. You really need to know what you're doing then after that.
That's a great point. That we may think we're seeing this massive thing, but
Yes.
that could just be something they're projecting into our mind to stun us into submission.
Yes.
That's trippy. Yeah, I never looked at it like that. Wow. I just wrote something down. Now, Jacques Vallée, he's the one that is depicted in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So
Jacques
for people listening, if you're wondering who that was, the French guy at the beginning of that movie, well, he's throughout it, but that's who Jacques Vallée, that character was based on Jacques Vallée.
Yes, that's correct. I was interviewing Jacques, maybe 3 years ago, and because he was releasing it was a documentary film on one of his cases in Argentina, I believe, and the farmer came out. It was a young lad at the time, and his father had asked him to go and round up the horses or let them out, or whatever the case may be. It was early in the morning, and he left the house, jumped onto his horse, and headed off across the fields. Now, as he was crossing the fields, this UFO buzzed him and landed about 100 foot away from him in the field. And he was absolutely stunned, flabbergasted at this thing. And he ended up going into the craft, and because the door was open, he had his encounter with these beings. And he had a very, very tough life following those encounters. Now, as Jack was talking, I was saying, but Jack, what happened to the horse? What was going on with the horse? And I think I asked Jack about 3 times as he was telling his story. And I must be thinking, why the hell does this blasted Irishman want to know about the bloody horse?
Right.
The reason that I was asking about the horse is because the boy was already hooked. But the horse has a very, very distinct fight or flight response.
Right.
And I wanted to know what the horse was doing.
Uh-huh.
The horse was uncontrollable. Okay. In fact, the horse ended up going blind and they had to shoot the horse.
Wow.
But the key factor here was understanding that even though we were blinded, we had other weapons in our arsenal, which was the horse, to understand what was going on with the phenomena. Mm. The horse did not like what it was seeing. Mm. It was afraid. We should be listening to that.
Absolutely.
Because more times than not, they shut our response down so that we take everything that comes along. There was another lady in Scotland who I was listening to speaking, and she lived at the top of a block of flats, an apartment complex. And she told us this story of how these beings came through and into her bedroom, and she was pinned to the bed. Mm-hmm. And all this happened, and they downloaded this information to her. It was all wonderful. Oh, it was happy. And then they left. And, I said, okay, fair enough. And then she said, and the funny thing is, and she laughed, she says, the cat, it wet the bed. And she thought this was very funny. And I said, hold on one moment. Again, we're referring back to the animal. The animal was afraid. That should have spoke volumes to you that the authenticity of what was coming through to you was not what it was. Mm-hmm. And our fight or flight is very, 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 very responsive. And if it doesn't react, if the fight or flight gets its chance and doesn't react, we're okay. We know everything is as it is. Yeah. But if our fight or flight reacts, then it doesn't matter what image that thing comes through on, whether it be a man, woman, child, beast, whatever the case may be. If our fight or flight reacts, it's because our own shadow, our soul is telling us, mm-hmm. Get the hell away from this. Yeah, it ain't good.
I wish that would kick in for some of my ex-girlfriends. That would have been a great little run, Steve, run. Actually, I think it may have, and I
I
think you
think you were
told it.
possibly listening to a different head there, Steve.
I'm glad you said that because you stopped me from saying it. Oh, it's priceless. Man. Yeah, like see, even Bigfoot. Now, a
Yes.
lot of people are trying to equate them to the aliens too, and I'd agree with that. But for me, I don't think and I get into this with Mary. I don't think these aliens are coming from other planets per se. They're coming from other dimensions. Now, that's not to say that there aren't planets in those dimensions, but I think the ones that are getting here, because I'm one of those guys that thinks that this area is enclosed. I'm not necessarily a flat Earth guy. I think there's more continents that we've been lied to about. I'll actually, this is being recorded, so I can do this. I'm going to send a picture, and this is one that is up at the UN on their wall. Well, actually, here's a good one. So I'll put that's in our little chat. That's
Okay.
what I think essentially is going on.
Hmm. Okay. Hmm.
And now you think about it, if it was Admiral Byrd, he was on the Longines Chronoscope long, long time ago, and I've got the video of him saying that when he was down there, he found a landmass the size of the United States, uh, beyond the South Pole, that no man had ever seen before.
Mm.
And I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
What we're
Yeah.
seeing there, and even Michael Salla, I'm sure you're aware of who he is, Dr. Michael
Hmm.
Salla.
Hmm.
He's starting to lean that way a little more too. He's like, well, I think he was talking about Hollow Earth, and I'm like, yeah, but he didn't say anything about going into a Hollow Earth. He just
Hmm.
said, you take for what he's saying. He's saying there was a landmass beyond the pole.
Yeah.
He didn't say anything about traveling into an enclosed or a circle in the ground. So
Hmm. Hmm.
and so that's what I tend to think. And that circular area there, my theory goes even more trippy. That area there that we call our Earth, that whole area is Eden. Adam and Eve, meaning man and woman, were
Yeah.
kicked out of Eden to one of those other continents. And at some point, we found our way back in here. And with the evil going on, they're trying to destroy Eden. They
Mm.
brought us back here to destroy God's garden.
Mm.
And I had said that to one dude, and it blew his mind. He's like, man, I'm like, I'm blowing my own mind because as crazy as it sounds, if you take in everything that you have read for all these years, there's little bits and pieces that stood out to you from each conversation that you mentally tucked away. And then all of a sudden, you see one thing that could, theoretically at least, tie them all together.
Mm.
And that's what was going on. Now, I'm not, of course, you don't have to believe that because this is just theory. But I found it very interesting that nobody so far has debunked that map that I just sent you.
Well, I know that this idea that Baird had flown into this hollow Earth, this hole in the Earth. Um, it's a different thing if you're flying into a hole with a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
You know you can get back out.
Yeah.
But when you're flying into a hole that you don't know that there's a way out in a plane,
Yeah.
the dynamics of that just don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So, that would possibly go against the story of Admiral Byrd. But the recent research that has been shown by our science has shown that there are huge land masses under the surface of the planet. In fact, there are mountain ranges that are higher than anything we have got up on the surface.
And oceans.
Yeah.
But,
Uh-huh.
so far down at least. And,
Yeah.
that could be another plane of existence, actually. That could be another dimension.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's, that dimension is just what's stuck in my head. It's not the planets in our solar system of people like the say, oh, the Venetians are coming to visit us. It's not impossible. Of course, I can't say no, they're wrong, but I just don't feel that. I have in my marrow, I feel that everything it has to do dimensional, and if everybody would go to that, and even space, I think is fluidic. And to me, it's the only thing that makes sense as to why would we be training in water. You
Yeah.
cannot have a pressurized system existing beside a non-pressurized system. So if space is a vacuum, Earth shouldn't be here, or at least there should be no life on the surface, unless we're enclosed in a dome. So there's a trap, right? It's got to be one thing or the other. Both of them are not what we've been told, and both of them are pretty friggin' incredible theories if one of them is true.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to know. You know, we haven't got anybody down there yet. But the dimensional aspect, I'm an avid supporter of the dimensional gateways, and the idea that these things are coming through dimensionally. I'm a big believer. And you know, whenever I was out in California, I was up at a reservation there that had this doorway for, they claimed it was for Bigfoot to come through. But while I was there, I was also looking at the other paintings on the walls of this rock, and I said, no, there's a creature there that I can recognize with the three fingers. I said, what are these? And the Native American, he turned to me and he said, it's not only Bigfoot that uses these places. And I smiled, and both of us headed out again. But rocks are a big thing. It seems that a huge majority of these things utilize rocks, and I still don't understand the dynamics to it. But we see UFOs flying into the side of mountains at full speed. We see now, one moment Bigfoot is there, and I've seen Bigfoot himself disappear in front of my eyes, and I'm thinking to myself, how did he do that? At that particular location that I mentioned there before about the doorway for the Bigfoot, I was sitting across the river, and I was just minding my own business. In fact, I was probably just listening to the water, heading past, not thinking of anything. When I looked up, I got the sense that I was being watched, and across on the other side of the river there was this huge creature that was standing looking at me. And he took 2 steps to the left, to my left, which would have his right. 2 steps and he was gone. And it's not the case of that he slipped into the bushes. It wasn't that.
Right.
He vanished. He just dematerialized in 2 steps. How do we even try and compare to that? So, you know, yes, I do believe that there's a lot are using this stuff dimensionally, and as I say, rocks are a definitive key to this phenomenon, to understanding it. Now, when we look at David Paulides' work, fellow American there in the U.S., he's a former police officer, and he wrote the books Missing 411, and he said that. The majority of people that have disappeared in the US national parks, they disappear in boulder fields. Again, we're back to the rocks. Now, when we go back and we start looking at the heritage of the fairy tradition, say within England, we have these creatures that were called goblins, and they were horrific in their own way, in their own right. But a goblin originates, the name originates from Old French gobelin, which originates from the old Germanic kub. Kub means hole in rock. So these creatures are coming through from the rock. And it just doesn't end there, because we talked earlier about the Banshee. Banshee, woman of the she. In today's crossing of words and meanings, we understand that the she are the fairy, but that was not the case. In the original terminology, Banshee, it's woman of the mounds. The mounds are made of stone.
Yeah.
She is one of the people of the mounds. The original doorways, the gates to the other dimension.
It's supposed to be trees as well, especially when dealing with Bigfoot as well. There was also sky, but when you were talking about the rocks, there was I remember seeing a video from Skinwalker Ranch of a thing that it looked like a panther, but a mutant panther. Like it was massive, and it was hopping around on the rocks, and it was looking at them, and then it hopped up a couple more feet, jumps anyway, a couple more jumps, and then just vanished.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's pretty interesting to me as well.
Yeah, the Skinwalker Ranch thing is an enigma in itself.
Yes.
I think there's an element of gold hunting involved in it, to be honest, if I'm to be blatantly honest. And I think that in itself comes out with the hidden symbolism within the show. You see, great wealth has always been hidden, certainly from a Celtic tradition and Middle Europe. Great wealth has always been hidden by giant serpents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you start looking into Tolkien's work, you find out that the serpent is a giant dragon called whatever his name is. I can't remember.
I can't either right now.
But for the ancient Celts, the image of a dragon, the Middle Age dragon, or the Middle Ages, sorry, would be alien to them, because to them it was a giant serpent. But that giant serpent morphed into a dragon as what we know it is today.
Exactly.
So the great wealth of the gold and the riches was guarded by a dragon. Who guards Skinwalker Ranch? The guy with the gun is called Dragon.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's his nickname.
There's a lot of wealth underneath that ranch.
I wonder who gave him that nickname now. Now I want to get one of those friggin' guys on the phone, too. Right? Hey, because there's the one guy who was getting injuries. He wound up having to leave the one time. His brain was swelling on him and stuff. Tell them to wear those friggin' iron pins and stuff like that, and that may help them so that they don't end up getting hurt.
Yeah. But there you go. It's a strange old world.
I never looked at it like dragon guarding the wow.
There's a huge amount of gold within that region of Utah, and also whenever you look at the scanning equipment, there's been mentions of large metallic objects under the ground. Mm-hmm. That's what the scanning equipment was designed to do.
Right.
So
they had also figured out that, remember, they were shooting up rockets and stuff too, and they had figured out radiation or something was coming from a certain height directly above the ranch. And so then I'm sitting there, oh man, it sucks that there's so much time in between the seasons, right? Because you start to get, oh man, they're about to show something, then see you next season.
You got to give them enough time to get the mining equipment in.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. And they had that rabbi come out and do some chant, and it seemed that that's when a portal was being activated and things were, it was wild. I liked that show.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. I'd really love to be. Have you ever had the chance to go down to Skinwalker Ranch? Or no?
I was out there in October 2019, and I was touring the entire area, and I met up with a few folks out there, and we were touring the area, and listening to what was going on, listening to the gunshots, a huge amount of gunshots. But we ended up in one location. Again, we're back to boulders, huge boulders. Mm-hmm. And because I was aware, again, doing this back at home and for so long now, you get to pick up on their signature, energetic signature.
Right.
And I was very aware as the gunshots were going off. A huge amount of gunshots was going off on the ranch. And I was saying, while we were at this rock outcrop, I picked up on them and I went after it. I said, right, I'm going after this to see where it leads. And I kept backing off and backing off and backing off. But I was picking up fear from it, and trying to figure out what are they doing on the ranch that's causing the fear.
That
Because
fear. Yeah.
I knew that the bullets wasn't going to cause them any harm because they're using lead. Lead won't work.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? It wasn't fear of them shooting. It was fear because they knew I was aware.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Yeah.
So that's what I had picked up on in the ranch. Um,
So did
and
you get to meet Dragon?
no,
No.
no, no, no. Um, I would like, I would like to sit down and have a conversation with them all,
Yeah.
And see off the record how close I was to my summary.
I would like to get my hands on the one that Bob. Oh, jeez. Now, see, now I'm blanking. The guy who did own the land before Brandon. Um, jeez, he was a
Bigelow,
businessman.
Bigelow.
What's Bigelow? Thank you,
Oh
Bob
yes.
Bigelow. I would love to get a hold of their results from the years they spent testing there.
I believe I was led to believe that he had made a statement recently, in regarding the ranch, and he said that he kind of wishes now that he never got involved, because he said his luck has been absolutely terrible, with losing his wife. There was a list of people he had been in terrible accidents and stuff like that.
Really?
And two others from NIDS had come forward and said that they wished the same, that their lives had fallen apart. All I can say is, um, with that particular type of phenomenon, if you're in it for the wrong reasons, it will
Yeah,
cut you a new ass.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's I think I was talking yeah, it was Mary that I was talking about even Bigfoot with.
Mm-hmm.
They can sense your intent.
Mm,
So you may get a peaceful, quick sighting if you're just going there genuine, like with the feeling of love and wonder, and
mm.
you're no ill intent in your mind. The ones that get attacked and chased away are the ones that they can tell that, oh, they want to shoot me or just get a picture of me and blah blah blah. So I'm gonna, or they
Yeah,
want to destroy the woods,
yeah.
and that's why I'm going to go after them.
And that again is another key phenomenon that fits into the greater global picture, the umbrella of
Yeah,
they know what you're thinking. Because we think with emotion,
right.
so they pick up on that,
Absolutely.
and that can be a problem. We have to hide that in order to work effectively within that network.
I don't think hiding it. I think they would sense we're hiding it. But I get what you're saying. We need to be able to control ourselves a little bit more when it comes to our energies, because I don't know how many times I've been walking around and you feel somebody staring at you. There is
Mm,
like a global connection, and
yeah.
everybody's magnetic fields resonates with everybody else. And you can feel the intent. Like I would, when I was playing in bands, uh, I most of the, and even when I wasn't doing a show, when I would go to see bands, I would sit by myself most of the time, and you just watch people, and you can get a vibe of, you watch the show, you can, okay, there's the tough guy, there's the jock, there's the girl who's the flirt, there's the girl who wants to sleep with every guy in the band, and you just watch the drama unfold.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And that's a great way though to start getting good at reading situations better, especially if you're someone who tends to be naive when it comes to dealing. And I was naive. You expect people to treat you the way you treat them. That's
Mm-hmm.
not always going to be the case. So being more aware of the vibes you're picking up, reading the room, if you will,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
can do a lot. And if you're going out to try to find Bigfoot, being able to just go out there with positive energy is going to
Yep.
get, you're going to have a way better, at the very least you'll hear them knocking. They may give you a tree
Yeah.
knock,
Yeah. Yeah.
or throw something near you but not at you, just so you can have the experience.
There was one occasion when I was out at in Poland at Wolfschanze, which was during World War II, was Adolf Hitler's forward command post.
Right.
It's a huge network of concrete bunkers, and we were staying in one of the former SS bunkers on the
Mm-hmm.
site. And it was the only time that I ever got close to what we would associate with Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And we had tracked information across into Argentina. We had been to Argentina and everything else, but the closest that we got to was there. Now, Adolf Hitler was a terrible sleeper. He suffered insomnia, and he would have people in his place at night and entertaining them with various different music pieces and everything else, and chatting the night away. But when we went to the site of his bunker, which was like it's pretty much a hole in the ground now. It was absolutely destroyed, bar some of the remaining walls. I went into that and I knew that I could not tell the crew or the cast what I was going to do. I knew that I had to lock it in here, and what I find is us males have this ability to open a nothing box in our brain, and we can sit quite comfortably with that nothing box open and stare into it. And that's where I kept my brain focused on nothing. And I told them what I wanted them to bring and where to set it up, but I didn't tell them why.
Mm-hmm.
And the crew were the same. I told the crew, this is where you need to be. I'm not telling you why. Then we went in. And when the music was started, at that time, like that, like flicking a switch, suddenly this place came alive. And the hair went up on my arms and my neck. I knew that my body was telling me, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And one of the other cast, he was listening to this thing walking around the outer edges of this bunker going, what the hell is this? And it got to a stage where we had to finish the experiment and shut it off. And the moment that we shut it off, everything dissipated and left. And I can remember one of the crew coming to me and he says, I've been with you for some time. That was the best thing I've ever experienced.
That's true.
That was the closest we ever got to Adolf Hitler.
What show was that?
What's that?
What show was that?
That was GHI, Ghost Hunters International.
Okay.
And there was quite a few other times there where I used the same technique, and I found it to be effective. When we're able to shut off our thoughts of what we need to do, and lock that away so that there's not even an emotion tied to it.
Right.
And you open up part of your brain, which is like what we would do when we sit fishing. You're doing nothing.
Right.
And that you're running on automatic.
Right.
So when you do that, you cut off their access to you, to what you're doing. And I found better results that way.
That's cool. And when you do that, you're also opening yourself up to certain other things that you may want to encounter. That is wild. And I see something had popped in my head that I want to ask, but just disappeared. Actually, okay. Do you still keep in touch with the guys from GHI?
I hear from now and again. I would hear from Joe Chin there down in Rhode Island, from Dustin Perry. That's about it, really. Susie over in Los Angeles, I would hear the odd thing from her once a year or something like that. But that's about it. It's more difficult for me being on this side. They've got the all the things going on for them in the United States, where I'm here doing my thing in this little part of the world.
And traveling is kind of limited at the moment.
So. Well, yeah. Thankfully now we're starting to see things open up. But of course, then we had the threat of war in Europe. Oh, great!
That's what I wanted to ask you. Now, this is just our personal opinions, people. What is your opinion, thoughts about what's going on there with Putin? If you care to share them.
I would be resistant to following the mainstream media. And I would urge people to do their homework away from the people who told us what was happening over the pandemic over the last 2 years. Why should we trust them now?
Exactly.
And I would say, do your homework. I'm not going to say either way. War is absolutely terrible. People should not be losing their lives on either side. But behind war, there's money.
Absolutely.
You follow the money, you'll find the reasons. And it ain't what mainstream media is telling us.
Well, actually, mainstream media is giving the view that Russia has attacked. They're attacking labs in the Ukraine, and they're attacking the Rothschilds' servers for their banking.
Mm.
We've been told that there's this big war going on and all these casual stuff. There's been some fighting, yes, but Russia is targeting those biolabs that are owned by the Pentagon. Like a lot of people don't realize that. Well, everything that the Russia collusion thing, everything that the Democrats and Biden and Hillary were trying to blame on Trump was exactly what they were friggin' there doing. And the eastern part of Ukraine had basically become like a den of sin, and it's and like now they're trying to get people and these servers and these labs. Trudeau is going, we'll take them. So now he wants to turn Canada into what the Democrats had turned Ukraine into their personal piggy banks. Now, these are just opinions, people, but they happen to be ones that at times are expressed on some mainstream channels, especially Fox.
I do get worried when we start hearing about biolabs and things like that. I often wonder to myself, why on earth do we have these things?
Exactly.
On either side, why on earth do we have them? And we can see how successful biolab security can be when we consider what happened 2 years ago in Wuhan. And I think the bigger question is, who was sponsoring Wuhan? That's something which seems to fall pretty short within the questions from the mainstream media. But yeah, it's a wicked world that we live in, and there's a plan unfolding in front of us, and we should be very, very careful not to turn our eyes away too far from the COVID restrictions.
That's what this war is about, I think.
What they're changing and altering and passing through quietly while we're looking at the other hand.
Absolutely. 100%. That is exactly what I think is going on. This war. Now, they do have issues there, but it's mainly they're doing that to get us off the fact. They're giving us the dangling keys going, okay, we're going to drop some of the mandates now. Yay. Yeah. Oh, there's a war over here. Oh, look at the war. Look at the war. We don't want you coming for Fauci. We don't want you coming for Obama. We don't want you coming for Gates. Look over here. Look over here. So.
Yeah, it's quite a world now that we see unfolding in front of us. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, I do see what we were doing to the planet, and it couldn't be sustained. We needed to change. However, what they're asking us to change to is not feasible either. Like Ireland itself, they're really pushing this idea of electrical vehicles. We don't have the infrastructure for electrical vehicles. If we were all to turn to electrical vehicles overnight, we would all be short of electricity to do anything. And never mind that the bloody vehicles are that crappy that you barely get 150 miles before you have to stop for another 45 minutes. To move on. It's just not workable. And especially when you live in the country like we do, electric vehicles are not the answer. No. They just won't work. And our guy who's in government and represents the Greens, oh boy, what a number he is. Tells us what to do and how we have to pay our taxes with the price of fuel going up through the roof. Meanwhile, he's driving a smoky old Range Rover, and falls asleep in government when he's being asked questions and everything else. It's really, really, really silly. But he turned around and he said, "Well, he proposed that maybe each village should have one car, and we can share the car. Where's this? Is this some communist country that we've suddenly changed into
He's been talking to
overnight?
Klaus Schwab. He's been talking.
Yeah,
You will
yeah,
own nothing and be happy.
yeah. Klaus, I would love to get into a room with Klaus. I'm usually very respectful of my elders, but Klaus, no. Um, but there we go. Such is life. Such is life. That's where we are, and it's just about seeing what's being delivered to us through mainstream media and our television screens,
Yeah.
and finding that middle ground. It's important that we find the middle ground, and find out what's happening. Even I'm certainly not a sheep. By no means am I a sheep, but I find even by sticking my head above the parapet, you're quickly spun in this tide of misinformation and everything else. So we have to be careful and study what's going on and what's happening. But they've generations of planning in front of us.
Oh yeah.
Like, how do
And
we
the money to
prepare for
back
that?
Yeah, that's what I've been arguing. That's been my point on the chat room for our hosts. We have our own separate host chat, and people get into that stuff all the time, and it's we should not be in the, like, there's no other reason for what's going on. Absolutely none other than it's Bill Gates has flat out said it. I've got video of him saying the world's got over 7 billion people, and there's starvation and all this other stuff. But with vaccines and new healthcare procedures, we can reduce that by 30%. And everybody's clapping. They're all clapping, thinking, oh, he's going to reduce sickness by 30%, which sounds great. But what he really said was he's going to reduce the population by 30% by using vaccines. And then here we are, right? Get your jab, get your jab, get your jab. Like,
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem that we're going to have to face. That's for sure.
actually, another thing that had popped into my head was during the first 2 weeks of lockdown. I'm sure you must have noticed this too. Everything was healing. The planet was healing. The air was getting, because everybody was locked down. Boats, planes, everything for that first 2 weeks. The air was clear. The water was getting clear. Fish and wildlife were venturing back to the friggin' cities. After 2 weeks, imagine how quickly the air and everything and water could heal itself if we figured out, like, used free energy instead or something. Planet, it would be an Eden again. It wants to heal. The human body wants to heal naturally. That's why they're every year. It's time for your shot. Spraying the chemicals. Look at all the things they have to do just to get us a little bit sick and keep us sick if they can.
Yeah.
So just imagine how strong we are if none of that was the case. And considering it is the case, there's only one conclusion you can come to: is they want us all.
It's quite worrying. In fact, it's very worrying, of course. And we've just turned grandparents in January, so those things go through my mind, for the generations ahead, wondering what's this world got in store for them. But oh well, that we got to face. We got to face standing.
Yeah, exactly. But we do need to, and somebody, Mary, among them, a couple of people I've been lucky to talk to the last few days, keep saying we're here for a reason. As silly as it may sound, we chose to be here at this point for a reason. Whether that means our reason is we're in and we're trying to wake people up to the evil going on in the world, or maybe the person's mission was to come here and get and die from that so they can wake up others.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to wrap my brain around that now. And it is helping. It's helping me. I'm still a little sad, but it's keeping me out of the depression mode of it.
Well, I think for the people that worry about the idea of someone somewhere pushing the button that will destroy no doubt all life on the planet. But I was just going through research tonight for my next lecture next month in England, and within the getting back to the deceptions of gods and men, within that I look at this idea of these shining ones, or the bright ones,
Right.
who appear on mountainsides, again close to cliffs, close to rocks, and in caves. So these shining ones appear, and they deliver this message of, oh, the world needs to change, and blah 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 blah, all this nonsense that they come out with, trash. And I went down through a list from 1907 until 2017 about where they were appearing and when they were appearing. And what I did is correlate those with these negative beings that were coming through, portraying themselves as being positive and all the rest.
Right.
The majority of these particular things ramp up and begin appearing in negative magnetic anomalies 10 years before a war breaks out. So 10 years before a war breaks out, we tend to see this influx of these appearances that are appearing within negative magnetic anomalies.
Right.
This brings us to present day. We're sitting, what we're told, of course, with the modern media, we're sitting on the verge of war. The figures don't support this.
No.
These things over the past decade haven't been moving whatsoever.
Right.
And the facts speak for themselves. This is a false war.
Yeah. If Putin wanted to outright do war, he would have cut the cables, the underwater cables that run our internet.
Oh, well,
Because,
not even that. All I had to do is switch off the gas supply to Europe, and they would all froze.
right.
And that's not happening. But I think the big thing to consider here is that Germany has something like 250 tanks, and France has 300, and all the rest and all the rest. But Russia has something like 13 or 16,000 tanks. Now I looked today at how far he had moved into the Ukrainian regions.
Mm-hmm.
But by now he should have been by the German border.
Yeah.
With a vast network of military support, which he hasn't done.
Exactly.
He hasn't even taken over a quarter of Ukraine at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the sign of someone who's wanting war.
Right. That didn't he help them declare themselves to be city-states?
Yes.
So.
Yeah. It's a strange old world. But he's also, isn't he, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard someone the other day saying that Russia is the only country, I think, left now that didn't accept a federal bank.
Right. So, and also Edgar Casey once predicted that Russia was going to save the world.
Yeah. Things that make you go,
Well, at this time frame, what he's doing, going after those labs and going after the banking hard drives.
Yeah.
I think that Edgar Casey was right. And he is the only one, because they got rid of Gaddafi. Gaddafi was one of the other ones who was all about his people and trying to make sure everybody's just not being screwed by the evil.
Mm-hmm.
So they kill his ass out. Of course, he sees what they do to Gaddafi, and you're not doing that here. I don't friggin' think so. If he came over here to North America and had weapons aimed, actually, it wasn't that what the Cuban crisis was about.
Yes, that's
America
right.
was losing their friggin' minds.
Yeah.
So what? He's not supposed to feel the same way if NATO takes over Ukraine and they become part. Come on.
Yeah. We were there not so long ago, but the shoe was on the other foot.
Mm-hmm.
It's strange, but misinformation is flying everywhere. And I seen some of the videos of what the Russians were doing, and they were clearly in a desert climate on these videos, and I'm thinking, what the hell are they doing? Why are they trying to say this is the Ukraine? And other videos where it's clearly in the summertime.
Yes.
it's a huge amount of misinformation.
And people are believing it, though. Have you heard of the Smith-Mundt Act?
No.
Get ready to give your head a shake. This is something that was created in the 50s, actually. It was it was proposed at the end of World War II, and it was put into play in the 50s. I could be slightly off by a couple of years in the years I'm talking about, but it was something that was put into play that made it legal for the United States. What was the department of the one that Hillary Clinton was in charge of? She was the Secretary of State,
Mm.
to produce propaganda and theater to disseminate to other foreign countries. In 2012, Obama, with his NDAA, pulled the provisions from the Smith-Mundt Act, making it legal for the State Department to lie to everybody, including Americans, create fiction.
Yeah.
And here we go. It's been since 2012 on, even 2008, that things started slipping into the twilight zone as far as Democrats becoming mental cases.
Yeah.
Because I used to consider myself a liberal. Now I would claim to be in the middle, and it's hard to want to be a liberal when they're just being so flippant stupid. I believe in helping people around the world, but I think we should be helping our country first. A lot of homeless people here, a lot of kids being and everything else.
Yeah. That's a terrible thing. That's horrific. That needs to end. Really does.
And well, look at Biden. Why is he not protecting his southern border? They're letting child traffickers and drug addicts and drug dealers just come on in, and giving them money. But they're saying, oh no, we need to help protect the Ukraine's border. It's that anybody could still be on. What it is people are afraid to admit that Trump was right. They have Trump derangement syndrome so severely, and he's not perfect either. I believe he's still
he's not, and that I think was a problem as well. It's about trying to. It's up to us to find the middle ground, and Trump kept talking about Hillary and all the rest, and I'm not going to say anything bad about Hillary in case I end up with a very severe case of Hillaricide.
Yeah.
But he had the option to have her arrested, and he didn't.
Exactly.
And there was talk of all this stuff going to happen in Washington, where these people that were going to get it.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. So I do wonder, and I think politicians today, we really need to really scrutinize who they are and what they're doing. I think the politicians who have got weight, who have got the political parties, I should say, that have got the weight, are now following the same agenda. Right. Globally, they're following the same agenda, and I think the smaller ones who would have no impact, they seem to be the ones that are really trying to get the word out, but it's not making a difference. Trudeau, he should have been gone, and how he has lasted, I have no idea. I don't know how he's doing it.
Klaus Schwab.
Gone. Klaus Schwab and see that one down in Australia or New Zealand. Whew.
Yeah. Well, even Trump's daughter was part of the World Economic Forum, the Young Leaders thing. Klaus Schwab, he had a little group and they got together and had talks and stuff. She was involved in it. So how can you trust Trump either?
I didn't know that she was part of that now.
Yeah.
I did not know that. But your New Zealand and France and Canada, I know they were all part of Klaus Schwab's little network. But isn't that always the way? When we go back and we look at the old gods and there were two types, especially from the Greek traditions, that we communicated with. One looked like Pan, what we would think Pan to be, this god of the wilderness. But the one that causes me great interest and causes me concern to track down through the ages that type were known as the Word, because it was the political elite and the kings and priests that came to those places to listen, to get information that would gain them power and greed and everything else. But they also got instruction on how to govern us.
Mm-hmm.
And this was coming from somewhere else.
Another
So
dimension, I'm thinking. Yeah.
those esoteric means of communicating with these other things, I still feel is going on today.
Wasn't that alleged to be started by John Dee? Actually, he was the one.
Oh no.
No, so you're telling
This
even before that,
thousands of
there
years.
was
This has
people
been going
doing
on
that.
thousands of years.
Right.
Yeah, I've been tracking the places all over the world.
Mm.
But yeah, John Dee was quite a character. Nice little man.
007. The original 007. And it just shows how you can be popular and in the now like John Dee was, and then all of a sudden somebody else comes along, and the very next day you're either going to be killed or you're banished and
Yeah,
not allowed
yeah.
to
You know, it
go.
was very strange with John Dee's work because, again, it brings it back to my work to make sure you know what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Because John Dee, of course, came up with the angel um, alphabet and words and everything else. But the thing is, angels didn't exist before I think it was 584 BC. We created them. They took over from Babylonian planetary gods. So what are we communicating with? What is it at that moment within the church that we decide to let this thing inside us? How do we know what it is? Should we be letting these things inside willy-nilly? No, I don't believe we should. We need to question what's coming through. We don't need to accept it blindly.
Exactly.
And I think that's very dangerous work there.
Blind faith, like that's what a lot of people are going on. The ones who are, see, I just if we could get people to turn off their TVs for a while, they'd be so much clearer in thought within a week or two. That not even just the COVID stuff, even the other stuff we're talking about, they'd be a little bit more open to supernatural occurrences as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
They just they've got it's so hard for people to admit they've been fooled. They just
It is,
refuse to.
it is, but there was just whenever you say about turning off the TV and things like that, there was a phenomenon. It was known as pandemic dreaming. Did you hear about this?
No, no, I thought
Okay.
you were going somewhere
Well, over
else.
the lockdowns, people were reporting having these very prophetic dreams and mainly nightmares about what was coming, and they didn't
Okay,
know why this was happening. The reason that we were having it is because the people were in lockdown. They weren't having to get up to go to work. So
right,
they switched off the alarms, which allowed their bodies to enter the last REM sequence before we woke,
right,
allowed them to access the ether to get
right,
the information. And so they're coming out of this dream state, having these terrible dreams of what's coming in the future and everything else. Well, that's your ability. That's who we were,
yeah,
not being slaves to the system that robbed us from that connection.
right. And the air, like I said, the air and everything was clear. If
Yeah.
air and water are mediums,
Yeah.
then we were picking up a lot more from the source, if you
I have
will.
to say that the first lockdown that we went into was fabulous. The
I thought it was.
weather was remarkable. I had never ever seen the like of it in Ireland before.
Mhm.
But after we entered the second lockdown, everything has gone to the dogs.
Yeah.
Um, Terrible, terrible weather. We ended up in the fifth storm in 2 weeks,
Mhm.
coming off the Atlantic, and I go, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
So they talk about this. I don't know, global warming. I don't know where the hell they're getting the figures from.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, that's
If it
another
is
fight. That's
real,
another
it's
fight for another
man-made.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think if it is real, it's man-made, and it would stop if we stopped, just like it did for those 2 weeks.
Yeah, but then they wouldn't be able to then they wouldn't be able to get any more money from us.
Exactly.
Again, it comes back to money.
Well, and taxes, right? Traditionally, you're supposed to only be able to or paying taxes during wartime because they need the extra
Mm.
help in that. Well, that's why they keep us in perpetual war. After World War II, we jumped right into the Cold War, right? And then after the Cold War, we had the war on drugs, then the war on terror. Well, actually, no, we had Vietnam and Korea and stuff,
Yeah.
but then war on drugs, war on terror.
Mm.
If we're constantly in a state of war, that's why they're able to keep robbing us with these
Mm.
taxes. And even then, they really shouldn't be able to because these aren't technically wars. No declaration of war, in fact, has actually been established through Congress
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Parliament or anything like that. So
Mm.
that's why you get guys
Awesome.
like Bill Cooper who end up getting killed for not paying their taxes.
Oh
Wild.
well. All right.
Is there anything else you'd like to get into? We're approaching the end of the 2 hour mark for the show. So is there anything else you'd like to touch on before I let you go for the day?
No, I think everything pretty much is covered. If folks want to pop over and see what I'm involved with and whatnot, they can pop over to charmstealer.com and and see what's happening. The new book, The Deceptions of Gods and Men, is available on Amazon.
Oh,
Now, my publisher also tells me that there is an audio book version coming.
oh,
It's
nice.
not just ready yet, but the hard copy, soft copy, and ebook is ready on Amazon. And then following that, we've got the third edition of the Banshee coming out as well in hard copy,
Right.
also available on Amazon.
And you were saying you have a lecture in England next?
Yeah, I'm heading over to England now from the 10th to the 14th. Looking forward to it, and in the heart of England, at a big, beautiful spa hotel. Um, and then I'm back again in England in June, down in Blackpool, I believe, for the Awakenings event there. And so we're going to be rubbing shoulders with all the top guys within ufology and paranormal and cryptids and everything else. So I'm looking forward to that. There's always a nice round table where we can share ideas
Mm-hmm.
and see if it's a good place to find the commonalities between the phenomena.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like I say, you can take a little piece from this guy, a little piece from that woman,
Yep.
put it all together, and booyah.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's fantastic. And thanks for getting back to me so quick when I finally found your new Skype address. And I'll try to have you on again as often as you'd like, but especially when you've got stuff to promote, send me a little message, or I'll even send you a message once every other month or something like that, and
I will
have you
indeed.
back on, and we can get maybe by that time YouTube will stop banning people for using the word COVID and stuff like that, and we can get some real discussions.
Oh no.
So you have yourself a great day, and
Thank you
people
very
listening,
much.
this has been Barry Fitzgerald, charmstealer.com. Um, a plethora of books. I'm going to be making a video for this, and there will be pictures of the books in there, and his website will be flashing over it. So everybody have yourselves a great night. Barry, you have a great night, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
ciao, buddy.